We have to be given the right opportunities to lead, and we have to be given the right skills to do it. And that's why I'm not interested in education where you just sit and listen and memorize facts. I'm about education that can turn into action. How do we get people to move with all the facts and the figures that are being taught to us?
I would like to introduce Anna Opoza. Anna is the co-founder, executive director, and chief mermaid, that's the best title, of Save Philippine Seas, a movement to protect the Philippines' coastal and marine resources by mobilizing citizen-led initiatives, SEA, initiatives for collective action and behavior change. She is so much better at the puns than I am. Anna graduated with a bachelor's degree in English Studies from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and earned her master's in conservation science from Imperial College, London. She was a global fellow for marine conservation at Duke University. Anna has pioneered a wide range of campaigns and projects in shark conservation, environmental education, youth empowerment, and waste management.
I see some confused faces, and I promise I will get to the explanation of how I became Chief Mermaid. But first, I know that I am the first Filipino MCAF fellow, so I thought I would tell you a bit about my country. So this is the world map. Anyone here been to the Philippines? Okay, a few hands came up. So this is where my country is. And if you look at the map closely, if you look at the Philippine map closely, this is what it looks like. And the Philippines is the second largest archipelago in the world. There are 7,500 plus islands. And this is where I was born, in central Philippines, in Cebu. And this is where I grew up, in Manila, the capital city of the Philippines. And the Philippines is actually one of the 18 megadiverse countries, which means we hold 70 to 80% of the world's plant and animal species. We have really high endemicity, which means a lot of the plants and animals that you find in the Philippines can only be found there. So we have almost 700 species of birds, 35% are endemic. We have more than 200 species of mammals, 65% are endemic. And we have more than 10,000 plant species, making us fifth in plant biodiversity, and 1/3 of that is endemic. So, growing up in the Philippines, you're surrounded by beautiful nature, but I really actually didn't care about that. Because when I was growing up, my big dream was to be a Broadway star. So when I was 12, I started performing professionally, and that photo was taken during my very first show. And in the next 10 years, I was immersed in musical theater. So that photo is me as Lucy in You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. I was in High School Musical on stage, Once on This Island, Bye Bye Birdie, and I really couldn't imagine life not ever singing or performing or teaching theater. And in college, I also had this big love for literature. So I decided to major in English language. And that was me right before I submitted my thesis, which was a sociolinguistic analysis of Philippine national identity through tourism materials. So not exactly what I'm doing now. But, parallel to this love for the arts and passion for communication, I was also raised by the country's first environmental lawyer, and we're very lucky to have him here. He took us to his projects. So we would go to reforestation projects, we would go to marine protected areas, we would swim with turtles and baby sharks. And I thought that every single Filipino's childhood was like this. I thought it was normal to grow up being exposed to environmental issues. And I pretty much learned how to plant trees as soon as I could walk. And I remember showing this photo to my best friend, and he said, "Oh my God, Anna, your brother is so cute." And I was like, "Oh my God, that's me." I don't look like my brothers anymore. But my dad also insisted that we become scuba divers, because for him, you don't know the true beauty of the Philippines unless you've been underwater. And not to brag, but we've been called the center of biodiversity on land and underwater. So, the movie Crazy Rich Asians? Right, it was set in Singapore. And I am convinced that if the Philippines had its own movie, it would be called Crazy Rich Oceans. There are over 1,000 species of fish. We have about 500 species of corals, 200 species of sharks and rays, 5 species of marine turtles, and I can go on and on. But every year, there are scientists who tell us that the Philippines has more species, probably per unit area than any other place in the world. But at this point, I have to give you a reality check. And even if we are at the center of biodiversity, we also happen to be at the center of adversity. And just about anything illegal and destructive you can find in the Philippines. In fact, we probably started these illegal activities, you know. We made a trend. And just in 2015, there was a study that came out stating that the Philippines is the 3rd largest polluter of plastics in the oceans. You know, first is China, second is Indonesia, and third is my country. So we throw away about 165 million sachets and 3 million diapers every day. So, you know, if we're overachievers in biodiversity, we're also overachievers in plastic pollution. And we're also a hub for illegal wildlife trade. And in 2011, I heard about this case. This photo was what really upset me. And the case was called the Rape of the Philippine Seas. It was an massive illegal wildlife trade case. And the headline read, "Coral Reefs Twice the Size of Manila Destroyed." And I remember being really upset, but also being frustrated because I wanted to do something, but I wasn't really sure what I could do. I was fresh out of college. I had just submitted my thesis, waiting for graduation, looking for a job. But I knew I could write. So I decided to write letters to leaders because that's something that my dad taught me. So it became like my hobby. So I wrote different letters to government agencies, and I wrote about the different policies that they were violating. And of course, one by one, they replied. So the Department of Environment and Natural Resources said, "Thank you, Ms. Aposa, we have referred you to the Protected Areas and Wildlife Bureau." And the Protected Areas and Wildlife Bureau said, "Thank you, Ms. Aposa, we have referred you to the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources." And the acting director of the Bureau of Fisheries then, if you look at our email exchange, I said, you know, have you seen this? And he said, "Let me look into this." And if you look at the timestamps, you'll see about, you know, almost a month difference. And I followed up and I said, you know, "Any updates?" And he said, "Let me check it out." So it was getting very frustrating. But it also became an opportunity for Save Philippine Seas to start. So because I was so active online, tweeting, messaging people about it, it attracted other like-minded people. So one night, these strangers got together on Skype and we said, why don't we start a Facebook page and a movement called Save Philippine Seas? So we started a website as well, and the whole point of it was just for this illegal wildlife trade case. And you know, sometimes ignorance is an advantage. Because I didn't have formal conservation training and I didn't know what you can and cannot do, I thought it would be a good idea to go to the Senate. And one day, my dad was going to the Senate and I tagged along and I went to the office of the head of the Environment Committee. And after waiting there for several hours, because I didn't have an appointment, I just like cold walked in there. And I went to his office. He was kind enough to give me time, and I laid out the letters and I said, you know, our government isn't doing anything about this. And he said, well, there's a Senate hearing tomorrow. I think you should testify. And I laughed, and I was like, oh my God, you're serious. And he was. And so that night, I summoned all my creative writing energies and like crammed this speech. And the next day, you know, I've been performing all my life, but that was the first and last time I ever felt my knees shake. I was so nervous. And so I ended up testifying in the Senate, and it was televised on national television. And I remember when I got my phone, I had so many texts and so many tweets and so many tags. And my friend all the way from the other side of the Philippines messaged me and said, girl, your hair looks great on TV. And I was like, well, thanks, but I wish you also paid attention to what I said. So that was back in 2011. And now, Save Philippine Seas is still alive. We're actually celebrating our 8th anniversary in 2 weeks. And now, SBS focuses on 3 things. One is engagement. We work with everybody from government agencies all the way to grassroots communities, schools, NGOs, individuals, corporations. We also work a lot on education. So I do a lot of work like this, standing in front of crowds, big and small, telling people why they need to care about the Philippine seas. But we are most passionate about empowerment. We like to empower people, our citizens, or like, as we call them, citizens, because we have to remember that we are people connected to the sea. And I'll tell you more about it, but in the next maybe 20 minutes or so, I'll just tell you a few lessons that I've learned from the Philippine seas. And first is not to get tied down. If your dream job doesn't exist, make it up. That's what I did with this Chief Mermaid business. So we had a volunteer who said, I think we should have business cards so that people will take us seriously. And I said, oh my God, what a great idea. And she said, okay, what title do you want? And I said, I think I want to be Chief Mermaid. And she said, are you joking? And I said, well, you know, other companies have CEOs and chief financial officers, and where's the fun in that? I mean, no offense, Vicky. I mean, you're really cool, though. So we printed it out. It was on business cards. And one day I was giving a talk just like this at the Marine Science Institute, and someone came up to me and asked for my card. So I gave it. And a few days later, I received a letter from the Department of Environment and Natural Resources addressing me as co-founder and Chief Mermaid. So I thought, oh my God, why are people taking me seriously? And then a few months later, I received a letter no less from the Office of the President of the Philippines Climate Change Commission. They forgot the executive director part and just left Chief Mermaid. So I thought, you know what, guys? It's legit. If the president says so, it's legit. But you know, there must be some truth into this mermaid metaphor. There's a writer who said that mermaids have no fear of depths and great fear of shallow living. And I feel that this has been an accurate description of what the last 8 years have been. In 2012, I made a wish upon a sea star. I had this big dream. I don't know what possessed me, but I had this big dream, and I wanted to build the country's first shark and ray sanctuary. I didn't know how, but I was going to do it. And my friend found this competition, a nomination for an award called Future for Nature, and they look for young conservationists all over the world. And she said, I'll nominate you. And I said, well, okay, I mean, you know, coming from theater, we're so used to rejection that I was like, whatever, we have everything to gain and nothing to lose. And I looked at the past winners, and they all had PhDs, they were all in their mid-30s, so I thought, well, we're never gonna win, but who cares? But then I won. So I went to the Netherlands, I received 50,000 euros to start this project. And Save Philippine Seas at that time was just a Facebook page, so anything more than 0 was a big amount of money. And then I was so excited, I was so proud. I was the youngest winner ever, I was the first Filipino winner ever, and then I came home and I had a panic attack because then I realized, oh my God, now I have to do it. And I had no idea how. But I did know that there is this shark in the Philippines called the thresher shark. And it's the island that I was born in Cebu. It's the only place in the world so far where you can see thresher sharks almost every day. So they go there to get cleaned. It's their cleaning station, so it's like their salon or their spa. And in this community, the thresher shark is their treasure shark. So approximately 80% of the income of that community comes from the presence of this shark. So I moved there and thought, okay, let's do it. And I even got a little bit of press. You know, it says, Malapascuas Ay, there's a shark sanctuary. No pressure, right? It was in 2012. And so I moved there, and it was a disaster. It was a mess because it was very arrogant of me to think that I could just move there and people would follow everything that I wanted just because I had budget. So for about, you know, we would have a call for a meeting with 80 people and 7 people would show up. And I remember crying and I couldn't understand. But then I realized that in our culture, in the Filipino culture, relationships are very important. And I couldn't make them act unless they trusted me. So for the next few months, I canceled everything in my work plan, and all I did was hang out with the locals. And this is where my theater background came in handy, because Filipinos love karaoke. So at night, I would go to the karaoke bar and sing like, I want to dance with somebody, or like Dancing Queen, you know. And I would like drink whatever they were drinking and just really hang out with them. And get to know the teachers, get to know the students, and it was only then that I could start working on activities again. So we work a lot with the dive guides and the boat crew because they're at the forefront of the tourism industry. It took years for us to work with local law enforcers, and we were able to establish the law enforcement team that patrolled the marine protected area to protect the sharks. We also work a lot with young people, children and youth, teaching them why they need to care. And we realized along the way that 70 to 80% of the local youth had never been in the water. And they live on an island. They were actually even scared of the water. So what we do now is every month we send, at least 20 to 40 kids, and we throw them into the water just for them to understand the value of what we're trying to do and what their own resources are. So to date, we've brought about 500 kids into the water. And it's in working with young people so much that I've learned to use our imagination, or what I like to call our Imaginotion. And there's opportunity for this because the Philippines is the social media capital of the world. Did you know that a Filipino spends about 9.5 hours online every day? And most of that is spent on social media networking sites. So we've used this as an opportunity, and when there's like a big trend online, we try to ride on it. So when Pokemon Go was at its peak, we created a campaign on thresher sharks and Pokemon Go to raise awareness on illegal wildlife trade. And then we had a campaign called Eco Guilt, where we get people to talk about the struggles they have in going zero waste or reducing plastics in their lives, because we want to make it a safe space for people to talk about their struggles. And we know that Filipinos are very romantic, so we also came out with a waste-free wedding infographic, getting people to reduce waste in celebrations just like weddings. And in 2017, I heard about this proposal of Nickelodeon to build an underwater theme park or a resort. You know Nickelodeon, right? Yes. And they had a proposal to build this in Coron, in this island in Palawan, which is the last ecological frontier of the Philippines. So my friends and I decided that we needed to do something about this. And one of our youth volunteers came out with a tagline, "Coron is not Bikini Bottom." And everyone was so excited. And I was like, what's Bikini Bottom? And he said, oh my God, how can you not know what Bikini Bottom is? It's where SpongeBob lives. Is it because you're old? And I was like, oh my God. I just don't find SpongeBob intellectually stimulating, okay? So it's like, you burn me, I burn you back. So our tagline was, Coron is not Bikini Bottom, and this was our poster. And it actually became one of the most successful online petitions in the Philippines with over 260,000 online signatures. And the next day, or the next few days, our other tagline was, Dora said explore, not exploit. And I know who Dora is, so I was cool again. But, we play a lot on puns. We make a lot of references in pop culture because I realized that there was this gap between communicators, between people who are interested in conservation and the scientists and policymakers. And I felt like I could be that dot connector that brought everybody together. So our goal is actually not to preach to the choir, but to build the choir. So we bring conservation to the most unlikely spaces. We've had conservation efforts in Zumba classes. We had a Zumba for the sharks to get moms and the aunties involved in the conversation. We've had communication workshops in a brew house or a tap room, so that if you're scared of public speaking, you can just drink beer and relax after, not get a little bit scared. We've had events in malls because malls in the Philippines have very high foot traffic. There are so many people in malls. And it's also working with young people a lot that has taught me not to take myself too seriously. You know, we can take problems of the ocean seriously, but not ourselves. So sometimes when I'm frustrated and I tell my mom about my frustrations and I'm sitting across her with a frown, she looks at me and says, "Oh, your wrinkles, you know?" And it's such a good reminder just to chill out. Because sharks may be important, but we gotta make sure that the Asians don't raisin and make sure that we stay wrinkle-free. So to have a lot of fun, we also have created mascots out of sharks, and we give them names, we give them characters, we make them walk around the city and talk to people about why sharks need to be conserved. And it's always working with young people that excites me the most. In 2015, I had the opportunity to start an environmental education program called the Sea Camp, and it's fully funded by the US government, so thank you for paying your taxes. It's going to youth empowerment in the Philippines. And this is not your ordinary environmental education program. It's very intense. It runs for 7 to 8 days, and through these 7 to 8 days, there's project management, public speaking, budget management, writing letters to leaders. There are outdoor activities where we take them snorkeling or we take them to a marine protected area. And what makes it so different is that towards the end of the week, they actually have to go out and do projects in the community. So they have to talk to their local government, they have to talk to the school, they have to talk to restaurants and cafes to reduce single-use plastics. Because I know what it's like to be 18 and want to make a difference and have no one listen to you. And when people tell me that youth are the leaders of tomorrow, I disagree. We can definitely be leaders of today, but we have to be given the right opportunities to lead, and we have to be given the right skills to do it. And that's why I'm not interested in education where you just sit and listen and memorize facts. I'm about education that can turn into action. How do we get people to move with all the facts and the figures that are being taught to us? So with the Sea Campers, we created a flagship campaign on waste called Waste Watchers. So we have different campaigns targeting single-use plastics under this Waste Watch umbrella. So some of the campaigns we've done is called Straw Wars. It's obviously a play on Star Wars. And what we do is we work with commercial establishments to reduce single-use straws. And this has been replicated in Borneo, in Brunei, and in Malaysia. Another one is Defying Gravity, which targets balloon and lantern releases. And it's partially Rapunzel's fault, because when Tangled came out, everyone suddenly wanted to do lantern releases. And another campaign is called Plastic Battle, where we partner with commercial establishments to reduce bottled water. Just bottled water. We're starting with bottled water. So we packaged all our information materials and we put them in our website. So in 2017, we got a little bit of funding to relaunch our website. And this is what it looks like. And if you click on the toolkits, this is what will come out, and you can decide what toolkit you want, any of the campaigns. And when you click on it, this is what the toolkit looks like. It's a one-stop shop for a campaign. So you have your template, you have a presentation template with all the facts that you need to know about the campaign that you can use to present. There's also letter templates, and all you have to do is edit the addressee, and then different signs that you can just print out and put on the wall or the tables. And we thought about different establishments that use straws so that they don't have to create new ones. But we also give options. So if you can't eliminate it completely, then you can do upon request or on selected beverages only. Because you also don't want to shock business establishments, right? And for Plastic Battle and Straw Wars, we even plot the establishments that we work with, and we put them out on a map so that if you're going to this tourist area, you'll know where to go to get your free water refill. And over the last 8 years, I've learned that we need to celebrate the big and small wins. And the thing is, in this advocacy, you don't always reach your big goal, but along the way, you will win a little bit. You'll win in inches, and you'll reach different milestones. So we haven't eliminated single-use plastics just yet, but we have succeeded in preventing thousands of straws from entering the sea, over 300,000 bottled water. We've stopped 20 balloon releases and lantern releases from happening, and we have over 300 establishments in our database all around the Philippines. In 2015, we were very lucky that the mayor of Daan Bantayan trusted us enough and signed our proposal to establish the country's first shark and ray sanctuary. And I want to tell you that this is my happy ending, that, everything just worked out perfectly because this policy was signed. But if you work in this field or in any field in development, you'll know that there's no finish line. There's always a way to scale up or to take your work to another level. So the Marine Conservation Action Fund of the New England Aquarium has actually been really instrumental in that. So after the paper was signed, we needed to do more work, and that meant creating an amended ordinance and creating the management plan. So for months, we organized stakeholder consultations with fisherfolk, with isolated island communities that have never been part of this conversation, so that the process is participatory and that everyone is engaged and everyone is aware that this initiative is going on. Last year, we filed and we wrote the national policy for shark conservation in the Philippines, and it has sailed through the first 3 readings in the House of Representatives, but now it's been shelved in the Senate. On Monday is our midterm elections, so we'll have a new set of senators then. So hopefully we can take it to the finish line. In terms of plastics, now the policy that I'm working on is to provide refilling stations so that we can reduce our single-use plastic dependency. And this has been really difficult in terms of logistics. I mean, think about all these 7,000 islands getting refilling stations, right? And of course, SBS, Save Philippine Seas, has been an evolving movement. So in 2011, we had no staff, we had no office, we had no money, but we did have a Facebook and Twitter account, and we had a lot of optimism. Now it's 2019. We have 5 project-based staff. That's 500% growth, you guys. And then we still don't have an office, but I do have a home office, which doubles as SPS's headquarters and storage space. We have volunteers, mostly from our pool of Sea Camp alumni. And we have an operating budget. Just last month, I finished our audited financial statement, and it's about $105,000 US. And if you think about it, that's very small, if relatively. But I also feel like it's the lack of resources that have made us really resourceful. And it's that it forced us to be collaborative, it forced us to be innovative because we don't have a lot of funding. This year, I decided to be a little bit more ambitious, so now I decided to add $50,000 to our target, and we've reached, as of last month, we've reached the 60% mark, so a little more than halfway, but still working on submitting grant proposals. And we have a very active Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram community, and I'm so proud to tell you that all of those likes and follows are organic, because we've never had budget to boost our posts. But see, but the good thing about it is that they're organic, so they're actually very responsive in the things that we post. But more importantly, I think the biggest lesson has been to have hope. It's really important to have that sliver of hope and really hold on to that. Jane Goodall has the Tapestry of Hope, and Sylvia Earle has Hope Spots. And 2 remarkable women, Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey, said, "Though hope is frail, it's hard to kill." So even if you have that tiny bit of hope, we gotta hold on to it. Because I realize also that no one else is going to do this. I'm not fishing for compliments when I tell you that I am not the smartest or most intelligent or most talented person. Everything that I do, I've had to work really hard at. A lot of things come naturally to me. So when I was in theater, I rehearsed for hours and hours every day. When I was into creative writing, I joined one workshop after another because I was so hungry to improve my skills. And the same thing has been applied in conservation. I didn't come from a science background. So I had to read much more. I had to learn faster. I had to fail fast and fail forward because I realized that no one else was going to do the things I wanted for me. I had to learn statistics. I had to learn Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator and R. Oh my God, I hate R. People can relate with me. But But I also learned how to do these things because no one else is going to do it for me. No one else is going to save the Philippine seas except Filipinos. And that's why I'm working so hard to make sure that we are working towards that. Because let me tell you something, my real advocacy is to stop global whining. Not quite global warming, but I'm just so sick of people complaining and then not doing something about it. I want to be part of the solution, not part of the whiners and the problem makers. And my desktop wallpaper is this. And this was taken in one of our projects in Subic. And it's a little turtle heading into the waves, right? And it's not scared because it's going home. And I feel like that's what mermaids are supposed to do. We're supposed to go home, but also take care of that home. But my job isn't just to go into the wave. My job is to make those waves. Am I going to succeed in this endeavor? I don't know. And I know that in the next few years, I'm going to have one failure after another, one setback after another. But I also realized that it's not so much the outcome, but the pursuit of it. A lot of people that I work with, and sometimes I also get very frustrated because we are asking questions that we don't have answers to. You know, how do we deal with bycatch? How do we get personal care products and cosmetic products to small far-flung islands around the Philippines? I don't know. But we have to ask those questions. We have to ask the right questions and follow those questions because that's how we're going to find the answers. So I'm going to leave you with words from one of my role models, the Disney princess Moana. And she said, "If I go, there's just no telling how far I'll go." So thank you very much for having me here, and good evening. Yes.
So you didn't mention anything about your master's degree in that timeline. How and why did you squeeze that in?
Well, so the question is how and why did I squeeze in my master's? So after 3 years of working, I know that I wanted to stay in conservation. So I applied for I wanted to study in the UK because my dream was to perform in the West End. But I didn't get to do that, so I just did my master's there. And I got into Imperial College through a scholarship, the Whining scholarship. And I knew I wanted conservation science because it was one of the few courses that welcomed interdisciplinary backgrounds. I got rejected from other courses because they told me I wasn't sciencey enough. So there, and I loved it. When I did my master's, it just really opened a whole new world of statistics and scientific papers and all of these things that I don't necessarily enjoy, but it made me a much better conservationist.
At one point during the lecture, you mentioned that the Philippines is third plastic pollution. So one thing I know is like the first world exports a large proportion of its waste to the top 5 polluters. So to what degree do you think it's on the Philippines versus on first world nations that these top 5 polluters are the top 5 polluters?
Okay, so the question is, at what degree do I know that the pollution in the Philippines comes from Filipinos and not first world countries? Well, because I work there, so I know what it's like to live in an island. So because we're island communities, there is very poor or non-existent logistics and facilities that can bring or transport trash. So if I worked in a community with 7,000 people, and very rarely does the trash get taken out. So it's either people throw it in the ocean, or they bury it, or they burn it. So it's a very common thing in the Philippines. So I would say a lot of that comes from the Philippines. And there are waste audits conducted, showing how we've polluted our own environment. Yes.
Was there any point, like right now you seem really optimistic, but was there any point that you were just nervous about that, like it wasn't going to happen, that you weren't really going to be able to move forward past this big idea?
So the question is if I was ever nervous that I wouldn't be able to go forward with an idea or a project. And yes, all the time. Every year I have an existential crisis, every September and October. And I know the schedule because that's when the fiscal years end. So that's when the funding runs out. And I'm always like, oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to pay my staff? Do I have to be alone again? So I, panic for like 2 seconds. And then I'm like, okay, now I need to act. Now I need to do something. Because worrying isn't going to fix the problem. And it also helps to talk to a lot of my colleagues. Filipinos are some of the most passionate people, some of the most passionate conservationists because we witness environmental destruction every day. So that's where I draw inspiration from when I feel like giving up. Yes?
How large is the sanctuary?
The sanctuary is over 500 hectares. I don't know what that is in acres. It's been so confusing, this Fahrenheit, Celsius, miles, kilometers. But yeah, it's over 500 hectares. So it's pretty big. Yes.
Are there opportunities to come visit, volunteer, or dive with you?
There are definitely opportunities to come visit, dive, and volunteer for us. So my contact details are there. You can message me anytime. There was another hand. Yes.
I know the sanctuary is relatively new, but have
Yes.
you noticed any changes in the biodiversity of the area ever since it's been created?
Yeah, so have there been any changes in biodiversity since it's been established? There's anecdotal evidence of more sharks showing up, the manta rays came back, and coral is growing, slowly, but it's there. And right now, the Thresher Shark Research and Conservation Project, which is our partner, they're doing a study on the impact of scuba divers in the sanctuary. So that's going to be interesting. And it's a long-term study, so it's about 5 years. Even if the shark sanctuaries there, our problem now is that it's getting more and more popular. So there are days when there are like 200 divers, which isn't fun for anybody. And it might not be fun for the sharks as well. So that's what they're trying to figure out. Yes?
Maybe in the future, do you think you'll continue having sharks as your main species that you're kind of advertising to the public, or do you have other species or ecosystems that you are kind of planning on also kind of advocating for?
So that's actually a really interesting question, if we see sharks as our flagship species in the future. So we've been working on sharks. My friends and I have been working on sharks for 8 years. And just recently, so in addition to the Shark Sanctuary, we've also published the 2020 Roadmap for Shark Conservation in the Philippines. And we've also published the Shark Conservation Legislation Toolkit. So it's like teaching local governments how to create their own legislation. So recently, my friends and I, we're 3 friends who love sharks, and we were saying we're kind of bored with sharks already because we've just done so much on it. And I think once the bill gets passed, and we're confident that it's going to get passed, we're not giving them a choice. We're not giving our legislators a choice. We have to think what else we can do. So obviously when the bill gets passed, there's much more work, right? Like how to ID, the enforcement, the bycatch issues, and the devil will be in the details. So maybe we'll have a more ecosystem approach, or focus on plastics, or sustainable tourism, which is also a big issue in the Philippines. So we'll see. But I love sharks, so I don't know if I could ever leave them. Maybe we'll move on to other species. So now we're working on the not so sexy species like the wedge fish. They're not very cute, but don't tell them that. Yes.
How big is commercial fishing in terms of an industry that has, it's an industry that has a huge impact on oceans in
Yeah.
general, but is the Philippines doing anything to regulate that?
It's a very big industry. So the question is, how big is commercial fishing in the Philippines? It's a very big industry, and they're very powerful and well-funded people in that industry. We recently a few years ago, we amended our fisheries code. So it's imposing tighter regulations and higher fines for commercial fishing fleets that are not supposed to be in certain places. So there is movement being done to address it. It's not perfect, but it's a step forward in the right direction. I'm so diplomatic. Okay. Yes. Ooh, that's a really good question. What would I have done differently? I think I would have, I mean, obviously I understand that everything that I've done led up to where I am now, but maybe I would have read up more before, because I'm more of like, get it done versus get it like perfect, right? And in an ideal world, I wouldn't be raising funds. Like I would have someone else do it for me so I can focus on the campaigning and the advocacy side, and maybe train more people to help me. And I would delegate more, because in the first few years I thought I had to do everything and I had to be everybody in the organization. But now I'm realizing that it's okay to delegate and that I can sleep, you know, and that all the sharks in the world won't die if I have 6 hours of sleep in one night. So that's definitely what I would work on. Yes.
So what can we do as a general public to help? We're all obviously self-selected to be here, so we're all very environmentally conscious. But we can't be on the ground with you in the Philippines, so what action can we take that's bigger than just skip the straw, that's more systemic solutions? Have you thought about that when doing international presentations like this?
When it comes to international presentation, well, every audience is different. So, and the US has a special case because it's like one of the largest polluters in terms of carbon emissions. And then the Philippines is a country that gets the impact of these emissions and all this, you know. So there's a lack of environmental justice in that sense. And I know that the political climate hasn't been the most encouraging. I'm so diplomatic, right? I'm choosing my words well tonight because it's live streamed. But so one way that everyone can act is to get your local community to support the Green New Deal. So I was lucky enough to sit into one of the discussions on the Green New Deal. So getting local governments to commit to reducing their own carbon emissions and pushing for policies to stay, you know, to put renewable energy facilities in place. And other plastic pollution is becoming more and more popular as a topic. So it's just understanding what impacts your community has beyond the community.
Is SPS ever contacted by like startups or the innovators who want to try and help out? Do they know how to reach you?
So the question is if SBS has been contacted by startups. The interesting thing is we just signed a grant, also funded by the US government, so thank you for paying your taxes again, to create the first marine hackathon in the Philippines. So our job is to organize a hackathon, get startups, get, you know, tech innovators to create tech-based solutions for marine conservation issues. So that's going to happen at the end of June. I'm really excited about it because I suck at, I don't know much about hackathons, so I saw this as an opportunity to really learn and harness the innovations that Filipinos can come up with and support them in growing. And then we're also connecting to different government agencies so that we can link. And then I have a meeting with Google next week to see how Google Philippines can support the hackathon. I sent them a cold email and they replied because they know of Save Philippine Seas, so that's really exciting. One more question. One last question. Yes. Oh, a hackathon? That's a very good question because I just had to learn what a hackathon is. So we are looking for proposals for tech-based solutions to marine conservation. And then the finalists will get to meet either in Manila or Cebu. So it's going to be simultaneously happening. And for 48 hours, they're going to work on those prototypes. So they'll be coding, they'll be prototyping, they'll be talking to different specialists and experts in different topics. And then they're going to present on day 3, and we'll select winners to give seed funding to, and they need to implement it over the next 6 months. So that's the plan in my head, but we'll see how it turns out. Yes.
Thank you so much, Anna.
Thank you. Thank you.
Presentations.